I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I ran through the woods, each breath coming out in shallow gasps. The trees loomed tall around me, their branches twisting and reaching like skeletal fingers, but I wasn't afraid of them. No, I was terrified of the weight of my mistake, the reason I was here in the first place. I could still hear his voice in my head, Lucian's, low and commanding, the way he had looked at me when he left. He was everything, my mate, my alpha, my world. And I had messed up. Immature as always, thinking I could get away with childish behavior, pushing him away when all he ever did was try to protect me. I thought he'd never leave, but he did. So here I was, running through unfamiliar woods. My feet barely grazed the ground, fueled by pure desperation. I had heard whispers about this place, Midnight Howl, the legendary cursed pack. No one in their right mind would enter this territory, but I was anything but in my right mind. I had to find him. I had to make things right. Suddenly, the air shifted, the wind almost stilling in eerie silence. I stopped in my tracks. There, in front of me, I saw it. A dozen wolves. Massive, with coats of midnight black, they moved silently, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. My breath hitched. Before I could blink, their bodies started to shift, bones cracking and reshaping in a way that made my stomach lurch. One by one, the wolves began transforming into men, tall, muscular, powerful men. My mind struggled to make sense of what I was seeing, but it was real. It was happening. And then, I saw him. Lucian. Even among the rest, he stood out like a storm on a clear night. His sea-green eyes locked onto mine with a look so intense, I felt frozen to the spot. His hair, dark and tousled, framed his sharp, commanding features. His broad shoulders and muscular build gave him a presence that made it hard to breathe. I should have spoken. I should have said something. But my head spun, and the world around me tilted. I fell to the ground, unconscious before I could make sense of what was happening. When I woke up, I was in a place I didn't recognize. The air was warm and smelled of something earthy, like pine and leather. Slowly, I blinked, trying to adjust to the dim light around me. My body felt strangely comfortable, cushioned by the softest bed I had ever laid on. The room, or cave, more accurately, wasn't what I expected. It was luxurious. Warm tones of fur rugs, polished stone walls, a fireplace crackling softly in the corner. The space was both raw and royal, a place that seemed to belong to someone with power. And everywhere I looked, I could feel Lucian's presence, though I hadn't seen him yet. My heart quickened. I was in his domain. As I slowly sat up, the room seemed to spin again, and I had to press my hand to my forehead to steady myself. I was wearing a soft robe, my own clothes gone. My mind raced with questions, but one thought stood out above all. Where was Lucian? A soft rustling caught my attention. The entrance to the cave was covered by a heavy fur curtain, and it shifted as someone entered. Lucian. He stepped inside, his gaze locking onto mine instantly. The sight of him stole the breath from my lungs. He looked even more imposing in the soft glow of the fire, his presence filling the room effortlessly. His sea-green eyes flickered with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite read. Anger? Hurt? Longing? You're awake. His voice was deep, smooth, but there was an edge to it. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. Lucian, He held up a hand, silencing me. Don't. I felt my stomach twist. This was not the reunion I had imagined, not even close. Why are you here, Daisy? He asked, stepping closer, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he couldn't believe I had actually shown up. You did not obey me, remember? You made it clear what you wanted. I didn't know, I whispered, my voice barely holding steady. I didn't understand about the curse. I am sorry, Lucian. You didn't understand? He laughed, but it was cold, like the sound of breaking ice. You've always been childish. It's not your fault, it's mine. I would have understood earlier. I came back for you, to fix everything, I said, meeting his eyes. I know I didn't obey, but now I can make it right, Lucian. I will make everything right. Please let me stay with you, I said, almost holding my tears. He reached out, pulling me into his arms, crushing me against his chest. His grip was strong, but I didn't care. I melted into him, feeling the warmth of his body against mine, the rapid beat of his heart. I hate that I can't let you go, he muttered. I will make everything right, Lucian, I said softly. Let me take a step back for a second. I'm Daisy. I'm 22, a little clumsy, a little awkward, and I have this rare thing called immature personality disorder. It's why most people treat me like a child, and maybe why I don't understand things the way others do. My parents have always been worried about me, especially when it comes to finding a partner. They took me to a witch once. Yeah, a real one. She had these dark eyes that seemed to see right through me. She told my parents I wouldn't marry a human. Her partner will be a monster, she said, and it freaked me out. My parents didn't believe her at first, but after all the rejections I went through, they started to wonder. When I turned 22, they went back to the witch, asking for a solution. She laughed at them, saying, I told you before, but you didn't listen. And that's how I ended up here, dressed in a bridal gown, sitting at the edge of a mountain, waiting for a monster to come claim me. But he never showed. After hours of waiting, I was so broken, so devastated by what my life had turned into, I did something reckless. I jumped, and that's when I woke up here. When I opened my eyes, the room was blanketed in darkness. For a moment, I couldn't tell if I was still dreaming. Everything felt so surreal. The cool air brushed against my skin, and it wasn't long before I realized something wasn't right. As I moved slightly, I felt the warmth of someone next to me. My breath hitched. Who was that? I tried to sit up, but panic took over. I wasn't dressed. Fear surged through me, and without thinking, I let out a shaky cry. That's when he stirred. The man next to me. His presence, his energy, was so strong, it almost overwhelmed me. I felt the bed shift as he moved closer, and my stomach twisted in knots. Who are you? I barely managed to whisper, my voice shaky, filled with fear and confusion. He gently pulled me closer in the darkness. I froze. His grip wasn't harsh, but it was firm, almost protective. Daisy, he said softly, his voice deep and smooth. It's me, your husband. Husband? What was he talking about? Husband? I didn't even know this man, let alone remember getting married to him. I wanted to pull away, to scream, to ask him 1,000 questions, but nothing came out. Instead, all I could muster was, why am I not dressed? My voice was shaky and unsure. There was a pause before he responded, his voice laced with something gentle, almost comforting. A husband can see his wife in that way, he said quietly. It's okay, Daisy. You're safe with me. Everything about this was wrong. None of it made sense. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice trembling. I don't even know who you are, or how I got here. He sighed softly, his breath warm against my skin. I know, Daisy, he whispered, his tone gentle, almost soothing. You don't remember, but I'm going to explain everything soon. You just need to trust me. His words hung in the air like a promise I wasn't sure I could believe. There was something in his voice, something that made me feel like I should trust him. But my mind was spinning too fast to make sense of it. I swallowed hard and finally asked, "What's your name?" "Lucian," he said, his voice so low it was almost a rumble. "I'm Lucian." The room stayed dark. His hand brushed against mine, and though I was tense, there was something oddly comforting about it. "Can I see you?" I asked, stepping into the floor to turn the lights on. Lucian's grip tightened ever so slightly, as if bracing himself for something. "You won't see me until I say it's time," he murmured, and his voice softened. "Why?" I pushed, needing answers, needing to make sense of the swirling chaos in my head. He sighed again, but this time it sounded heavier. "I can't tell you right now, Daisy," he said gently, "but I promise I will explain everything." My mind was spinning in circles, but deep down, some part of me wanted to believe him. There was something about his presence, his calmness, that made the fear subside just a little. But the confusion? That remained. The silence between us was heavy, the air thick with tension and questions. I lay there, staring into the darkness, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't put into words. Lucian didn't say anything more, but I felt him next to me, his presence strong, like a protective barrier I didn't know I needed. I still didn't understand how I got here, or what any of this meant. But for now, all I could do was hold on to the little slivers of comfort his voice had given me, even if my heart was still pounding in my chest. I turned slightly, feeling the soft material of the bed beneath me. The room smelled faintly of pine and something earthy, like the forest outside. I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever was coming next. "Lucian," I whispered into the darkness, my voice barely audible. "Yes, Daisy." His voice came back, gentle and patient, like he was waiting for me to ask the question I couldn't yet find the words for. "I can't understand anything." Lucian's hand found mine again, his fingers wrapping around mine in a way that felt both protective and possessive. "You'll understand everything soon. I won't be here during the day. I have arranged everything for you, like foods, magazines, TV, and some toys. I know you like playing with toys," he said softly. "But for now, rest. You're safe here." I wanted to stay awake, to demand more answers. My body betrayed me. My eyes fluttered shut, and the last thing I felt was the warmth of Lucian's hand holding mine, anchoring me to this strange, unknown world. When I opened my eyes, the soft morning light peeked through the tiny window, casting a warm glow across the room. The cottage was simple but cozy, with wooden beams that hugged the ceiling and a fireplace that still held the faint scent of burnt cedar. It wasn't luxurious by any means, but it had everything I needed. A bed, a little kitchen. I even found some toys scattered around the cottage. A worn-out teddy bear, a beautifully carved wooden horse, and some colorful marbles. Curiosity bubbled up inside me as I stepped outside the room. The air was fresh, carrying the earthy scent of the woods, and I could hear birds chirping happily. I wandered outside, taking in my surroundings. The cottage sat on the edge of a forest, surrounded by tall trees that danced in the gentle breeze. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a patchwork of light and shadows on the ground. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, but there was also an underlying thrill in my chest. How did Lucian know so much about me? As the day unfolded, I busied myself with little tasks. I rummaged through the small kitchen, finding fresh ingredients. I prepared food, letting the aroma fill the air. Cooking felt like a new adventure, one that grounded me in this strange place. Time passed quickly, and as night began to fall, I felt a flutter of anticipation in my stomach. I had been waiting for Lucian, hoping he would return. With heavy eyelids, I eventually curled up on the sofa, allowing sleep to take me. I must have dozed off because I was suddenly jolted awake by the soft sound of movement. My heart raced as I felt a presence beside me. "Lucian, is that you?" I whispered, my voice barely above a breath.
"Daisy,"
he replied, his voice a deep, soothing murmur. The familiarity of his tone made me feel safe yet nervous at the same time. "I prepared food for you," I said, my heart pounding as I sat up, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep.
"I'll eat later,"
he replied, his tone casual yet commanding. Before I could say another word, I felt him lean closer, the warmth of his body enveloping me like a comforting blanket. There was something exhilarating about the mystery of it all. Even in the darkness, I could sense his intensity. I hadn't seen his face yet, but the way he moved, the way he spoke, hinted at a man full of depth and secrets. "Lucian," I whispered. His presence was overwhelming. He brushed his lips against the curve of my neck, and the touch sent a spark through me. It was as if every moment we had spent apart only intensified this connection. He took my hands, guiding me gently back down. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a rush of warmth spreading through me. I surrendered to the moment, letting myself be drawn into his world. I woke up in the morning. Lucian was gone. With each passing night, Lucian would come and go like shadows, leaving before dawn. We shared laughter, secrets, and dreams beneath the stars. Even though I had never seen his face, I could feel the chemistry between us, the way our laughter intertwined, the way our hearts danced around each other in the stillness of the night. In the depths of our quiet moments, I discovered a tenderness that filled the gaps in my heart. The nights were magical, woven with adventure and mystery. I was slowly beginning to feel that perhaps, just perhaps, this cottage and this man were meant to be part of my journey. And as I lay there, waiting for Lucian's return, I couldn't help but wonder how Lucian looks. The thought kept racing in my mind. The night was quiet, the kind of stillness that wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I lay next to Lucian, feeling the rhythm of his breath beside me. It was soothing, like a lullaby, and for a moment, I allowed myself to drift in and out of sleep. But something inside me stirred, curiosity perhaps. I wanted to know more about the man who had become such a significant part of my life in these short days. As I turned onto my side, I could see the outline of his strong frame beneath the sheets. I couldn't resist. The urge to know him better tugged at my heart, and so quietly, I slipped out of bed. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath my feet as I tiptoed across the room. Reaching for a matchstick, I struck it against the rough side of the box, and the tiny flame flickered to life. It illuminated the dim room, casting dancing shadows on the walls. My breath caught in my throat when I finally turned to look at him. Lucian was breathtaking. The contrast between us was almost laughable. My small, delicate frame versus his towering height and muscular build. The sharp angles of his jawline gave him a rugged handsomeness that took my breath away. I had never seen a man so striking in my entire life. But just as I leaned in to get a closer look, the flicker of the match startled him awake. His sea-green eyes snapped open, filled with a wild intensity that sent a jolt of fear through me.
"Daisy, what are you doing?"
he growled, his voice thick with sleep and something darker. I dropped the matchstick in shock, and it extinguished with a soft hiss. "I just wanted to see your face," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't mean to." But before I could finish, Lucian's body began to shift. I watched in fear as his features contorted, fur sprouting from his skin. He was angry, the transformation a reflection of his fury.
I told you not to see me,
he snapped, his voice now a low growl. My heart raced as the truth hit me hard. What's happening? I stammered, backing away slowly.
I'm cursed by the moon goddess,
he explained, each word laced with frustration.
I can only be human in darkness. My mate must not see me for the first year of our marriage. It's part of the curse. If you see me in my wolf form, my curse would never be taken back.
Lucian, I didn't know, I pleaded, my voice barely above a whisper.
I didn't mean to invade your space. I
was grasping for words, trying to understand the gravity of what was happening. But he didn't seem to hear me. Anger and sorrow flickered across his wolfish face as he turned away, the muscles in his powerful frame tense.
You shouldn't have looked. You've broken the rules. I can't stay here.
Wait, I cried, feeling the panic rise in my chest. Please don't leave me. I need you to explain. I want to understand. He paused for a moment, his form shifting uncomfortably, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. The wolf inside him struggled against the man, and it tore at my heart.
Goodbye, Daisy,
he said, his voice a mixture of pain and resolve. And just like that, he was gone, slipping into the shadows of the night, leaving me alone in the silence of the cottage. I stood there, the weight of his departure crashing down on me. My heart felt like it was breaking into a million pieces. The warmth of his presence was replaced by an aching emptiness. I had wanted to know him, to see him, and now I was left with nothing but the echoes of his anger and the haunting image of the man I barely knew. As I stood in the dark room, the flickering light of the match fading, I realized I needed to find a way to bridge the gap between us. I had to understand this curse, to fight for the man who had captured my heart in ways I didn't fully comprehend. With a determination that surprised me, I wiped the tears from my cheeks. I will find him, no matter what. And in that way, I reached in the territory of Midnight Howl Pack's territory. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I found myself standing at the edge of Lucian's territory. The trees loomed tall and majestic around me, their leaves whispering secrets in the gentle breeze. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the earthy scent of pine and damp soil, trying to steady my racing heart. I couldn't shake off the memory of Lucian's fierce eyes or the weight of his words. I needed to find a solution to his curse, and I was determined to uncover the truth. I walked deeper into the woods, my footsteps soft on the mossy ground. The air was cool, sending a shiver through me, but the warmth of my resolve kept me going. I brushed my dark brown hair behind my ear and adjusted the light sweater I wore. It felt comforting against my skin, a little piece of home amidst the towering trees and the unknown. Okay, Daisy, I murmured to myself. You can do this. Just find the answers. With every step, I thought about Lucian, his strong, muscular build, the sharpness of his jaw, and those mesmerizing sea-green eyes that seemed to hold a world of pain. I remembered how angry he had been when I accidentally broke the rules, and it stung. I couldn't let fear dictate my path. Lucian needed me, and I was ready to be brave. As I wandered deeper, I stumbled upon a small clearing bathed in golden sunlight. The beauty of it took my breath away. Wildflowers danced in the breeze, their colors vibrant against the lush green backdrop. I crouched down to admire them, feeling a flicker of hope. If nature could be so resilient and beautiful, surely I could find a way to help Lucian. Just then, a rustle in the bushes caught my attention. My heart raced as I turned to face the sound. Emerging from the underbrush was an elderly woman, her hair silver and flowing like a waterfall. She wore a long, flowing dress that seemed to blend with the forest, and her eyes sparkled with wisdom. "Ah, young one," she said, her voice like soft chimes. "What brings you to this sacred place?" I swallowed hard, surprised by her sudden appearance. "I'm looking for a way to help Lucian," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's under a curse from the moon goddess, and I need to break it." The woman's expression softened, and she stepped closer, examining me with a knowing gaze. "Love is a powerful force, child, but curses are tricky. They require great understanding and sacrifice to unravel." I nodded, my determination rising. "I'm willing to do anything. I can't just leave him like this." She smiled gently, and the corners of her eyes crinkled. "Then listen closely. The path to breaking a curse begins with truth and trust. You must discover the depth of his heart and what he truly fears." I felt a weight settle in my chest. "How can I do that? He's so guarded." "Patience," she advised, her voice soothing. "Show him you care. Share your heart with him, and he may reveal his." With her words echoing in my mind, I thanked her and continued my journey. I knew I had to confront Lucian again. The thought of facing him brought a mixture of excitement and dread, but I pushed it aside. I had to be strong for both of us. As the day wore on, I explored more of the territory, collecting herbs and flowers along the way, hoping they might help me in my quest. I remembered the woman's advice and made a mental note to be open and honest with Lucian when I saw him next. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the forest, I found a cozy spot near a bubbling brook. The sound of the water was calming, and I settled down, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. I closed my eyes and took a moment to gather my thoughts. Suddenly, the air shifted, and I sensed a presence nearby. My heart raced as I opened my eyes to see Lucian emerging from the shadows, his figure tall and commanding. My breath hitched in my throat, and I could feel a mixture of relief and nervousness flooding my senses. "Daisy," he said, his voice deep and melodic, cutting through the quiet. "What are you doing here?" I've been looking for answers," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "I want to help you break the curse." He stepped closer, his expression softening. "You shouldn't be here. It's dangerous." "I don't care about danger," I said, surprising myself with my own conviction. "I care about you, Lucian. I can't stand the thought of you being trapped in darkness." His eyes flickered with surprise and something deeper. Longing, perhaps. "You don't understand what you're saying, Daisy." "Try me," I insisted, taking a small step forward. "I want to know everything. I want to help you fight this." A tense silence hung between us, the air charged with unspoken emotions. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the battle between pushing me away and pulling me closer. "You're brave," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Only because I have you by my side," I replied softly. Lucian moved closer, and for a moment, I felt the world around us fade away. I could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fierce man behind the curse. The bond between us felt stronger, and I knew this was just the beginning of our journey together. "Let's face this together," I said, my heart racing. "We can find a way to break the curse. I believe in us." And in that moment, I felt the weight of the world lift slightly. There was hope in his gaze, a spark that ignited the fire within me. The adventure was just beginning, and with Lucian by my side, I felt ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting warm, flickering light on the stone walls around us.
Lucian stood by the window, his broad shoulders tense as he stared into the dark forest. I could see his reflection in the glass, his jaw clenched, his eyes shadowed with the weight of everything left unsaid. The air between us felt thick with unspoken words, and I couldn't stand the silence any longer. "Lucian," I said, my voice soft, yet steady. "You can't keep pushing me away like this. If we're going to face this, we need to do it together." He turned, his gaze locking onto mine. The moonlight outside barely touched his rugged features, but I could still see the conflict in his eyes, those deep, sea-green eyes that had drawn me in from the very beginning. There was a kind of pain there, something ancient and raw. I could feel it pulling at my heart, even as he tried to push me away again. "I told you," he said, his voice rough, almost a growl. "It's too dangerous. You don't understand what's at stake, Daisy." I took a step toward him, my bare feet silent on the cold stone floor. I could feel the chill, but it was nothing compared to the coldness I felt when he spoke like this, like I didn't matter, like he was protecting me, when all I wanted was to protect him too. "I do understand," I insisted, my voice firmer now. "I've read the journals. I know what the curse is doing to you, and I know there's a way to break it." Lucian's eyes flickered, and he turned away, running a hand through his dark hair. The tension in his body was obvious, every muscle in his broad frame taut, like he was holding something back. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, but something told me he wasn't ready for that. "It's not that simple," he muttered, his voice low. "Breaking the curse isn't like fixing a broken vase, Daisy. It's ancient magic, twisted by the moon goddess herself. It requires sacrifice." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and foreboding. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I didn't back down. I stepped closer, my heart beating faster as I searched his face for answers. "What kind of sacrifice?" I asked, though a part of me was afraid of the answer. Lucian closed his eyes for a moment, like he was trying to gather the strength to speak. When he opened them again, they were filled with a sadness I hadn't seen before. "You have to give up a part of yourself," he said quietly. "Your soul. That's the only way to break the curse. You have to offer a piece of your soul to me, to bind us together. Forever." I felt the air leave my lungs. My soul? A piece of it? I'd read about magic, sure, but this was something else entirely. I'd never imagined it would be like this. The weight of his words pressed down on me, but at the same time, I couldn't look away from him. My mind raced with 100 questions, doubts, and fears. Lucian stepped forward, his tall, muscular frame suddenly closer. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, even though he still kept a distance between us. His voice softened, almost pleading. "That's why you can't do this, Daisy," he said. "I can't ask you to give up something so precious. I've been cursed for centuries, and I've lived with it. But you deserve to be free. You shouldn't have to carry my burden." I hesitated, torn between my growing feelings for him and the terrifying idea of what he was asking of me. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't just about the curse anymore. It was about us, about everything we'd shared, the connection that had grown between us, even when we tried to fight it. "Lucian," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "I don't want freedom if it means losing you." For a moment, the room was utterly silent, save for the soft crackle of the fire. I could see the battle playing out in his eyes, the part of him that wanted to let me in, and the part that still believed he was protecting me by keeping me at arm's length. But I wasn't going to let him do that. Not anymore.
I turned and walked to the table where the old journals lay, the pages yellowed and fragile. I'd spent hours poring over them, looking for the ritual, the spell that would break his curse. I'd found it in the end, hidden among the ancient texts. It required more than just love. It demanded total surrender. "I'm not leaving," I said, my voice stronger now as I began to gather the ingredients the ritual called for. "You can push me away all you want, but I'm not going anywhere. We're doing this together." I felt Lucian's gaze on me, but I didn't look up. My hands moved quickly, gathering the herbs, the candles, the small silver knife that would be used in the ritual. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I didn't let myself think too much about what I was doing. If I did, I might lose my nerve. As I lit the candles, I could feel the weight of the magic settling in the room. It was subtle at first, like the faint hum of energy in the air, but it grew stronger with each passing moment, and I could feel it pulling at me, draining me, even before the ritual had truly begun.
"Daisy,"
Lucian said, his voice strained.
"You don't have to do this."
"I do," I replied, not looking up from my work. "Because I love you." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd gone too far. But then I felt his hand on my arm, warm and steady. I looked up, and for the first time, I saw something break in his eyes, something raw and vulnerable, something that told me he felt the same, even if he couldn't say it.
"You're stronger than you think,"
he whispered. I smiled faintly, though my heart felt heavy. "I'm just stubborn." The candles flickered, casting long shadows across the room. As I placed the final ingredient on the altar, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. My vision blurred for a moment, and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. The ritual was taking its toll, draining my energy, my strength. But I wouldn't stop. Not now. Lucian reached for me, his hand gently cupping my face.
"Daisy, please."
"I'm okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure how true that was. Just trust me." His hand lingered on my cheek for a moment, and then he stepped back, letting me continue. I closed my eyes and began the chant, the words ancient and unfamiliar on my tongue. The air around us grew heavy, and I could feel the magic swirling, pulling at the edges of my consciousness. As the ritual neared its end, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, like something deep inside me was being torn apart. I gasped, clutching at my heart, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. This was the only way to break the curse, the only way to save Lucian. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the pain faded, replaced by a strange sense of peace. I opened my eyes, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The candles had burned low, their flames barely flickering now. Lucian stood before me, his expression unreadable, but I could see the fear in his eyes.
"Daisy, what have you done?"
I smiled weakly, my vision blurring again. "I did what I had to." And then, darkness. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth as we crouched in the thick forest, hidden in the shadows of the trees. My heart raced, the kind of pounding that made my entire body feel on edge, like the world around me might collapse at any moment. The night was cool, but I could feel a thin layer of sweat forming at the back of my neck. Lucian was right beside me, his muscles tense, every inch of him alert like a wolf on the hunt. He turned to me, his deep, stormy eyes reflecting the faint moonlight.
"Daisy, you have to stay close to me. This isn't just some dark magic we're up against. It's something far worse."
"I can handle it," I whispered back, trying to sound braver than I felt. But the truth was, fear sat like a rock in my stomach.
The idea of dark forces was enough to make anyone shudder, but there was something more. This was personal now. Whoever had betrayed us was close, too close. And if Lucian was scared, well, that said a lot. Lucian's hand found mine, squeezing gently. It was the kind of touch that sent warmth through my chest, calming the storm in my mind for a second. His thumb grazed my knuckles, and for a moment, the world faded away, leaving only us. "I won't let anything happen to you," he promised. His voice was low, rough, the kind that carried unspoken feelings. Before I could respond, a rustle in the bushes snapped both of us back to reality. The pack had gathered behind Lucian, their faces serious. They all respected him, trusted him with their lives, and tonight they would follow him into the heart of danger without question. Lucian stood tall, giving a slight nod to his pack, signaling them to prepare. They were a family, bound by loyalty, and right now, we were all in this together. "We move in 5, he murmured, his eyes scanning the woods, always protective. "Stay sharp." As the minutes dragged on, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything pressing down on my chest. The ritual to break Lucian's curse was still unfinished. It had required more from me than I ever thought possible, parts of my soul, bits of my heart, and yet there was one final step, a step that terrified me, offering a piece of myself to him, forever. Could I do it? Could I lose a part of myself just to free him? But as I watched Lucian lead his pack, strong and fearless despite his own inner struggles, I knew I had no choice. My feelings for him had grown so deep that they wrapped around every part of me, like ivy crawling up a tree. There was no turning back. We moved through the woods silently, our footsteps blending with the sounds of the night, leaves crunching beneath boots, the occasional whisper of the wind. Lucian led the way, his senses heightened, always looking back at me, making sure I was all right. As we approached the clearing, the moon hung low, glowing like a silent witness to the battle that was about to take place. My heart quickened. This was it, the moment everything could change. Lucian stopped, his eyes locking onto mine. "This is where it ends," he whispered, his voice steady but tinged with something vulnerable. "I don't know if we'll make it out of this, Daisy. If something happens..." I cut him off. "Don't. We'll make it out. Together." Before he could argue, a figure stepped into the moonlight. It was him. The traitor. His presence sent a chill through my bones, but I stood tall, gripping Lucian's hand for strength. The air grew colder as dark magic crackled between the trees, swirling around us like invisible chains. Lucian's grip on my hand tightened as the final battle began, and the pack charged forward. But even as they fought, my gaze stayed on Lucian. There was so much unsaid between us, and I realized now more than ever, I couldn't lose him. Not like this. Together, we fought back the darkness, each of us giving everything we had. But the real battle wasn't just physical. It was inside me, the decision I knew I had to make. As I gathered the last of my courage, the traitor's sneering voice cut through the chaos. "You can't win this, girl. His curse will destroy you both." But I ignored him. I only had eyes for Lucian. And as the moment of truth came, I made my decision. I would finish the ritual. I would give a piece of my soul to Lucian, because without him, I was already incomplete. The world felt like it was spinning as I knelt in the dirt. The last few ingredients for the ritual spread out in front of me. My hands trembled as I drew the circle around us, the air thick with magic and tension. Lucian stood beside me, his jaw clenched, his chest rising and falling as he watched me, torn between wanting to protect me and knowing he couldn't stop what was about to happen. "Daisy," he murmured, his voice raw. "You don't have to do this." I looked up at him, my heart aching. "Yes, I do." His hand reached for my face, his thumb brushing softly over my cheek. It was the most tender touch, full of all the things he couldn't say out loud. "I can't lose you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Not after everything." I swallowed hard, feeling the tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "You won't lose me," I said softly, my voice trembling. "We're in this together, remember?" For a moment, neither of us spoke. The moon above cast a pale light over us, and everything felt still, like the world was holding its breath. Lucian's gaze locked with mine, and I could see the fear in his eyes, the desperation. But beneath it all, there was love. A love so strong, it was almost unbearable. Slowly, I began the ritual, my words quiet but steady as I chanted the ancient incantation. My body felt weaker with each word, like the magic was draining every ounce of energy from me. Lucian knelt beside me, his hand never leaving mine, offering silent strength as I continued. Then came the final step, the part of the ritual that required me to give a piece of myself to Lucian. My breath hitched as I reached for the knife, my hand shaking as I held it to my chest. It wasn't just about breaking the curse. It was about trust. About giving everything I had to the man I loved, even if it meant losing a part of myself in the process. Lucian's hand covered mine, stopping me. His eyes were filled with tears now, his voice hoarse. "Don't do this, please." But I shook my head, pressing the knife to my skin. "It's the only way." And then, before I could hesitate, I made the cut. Pain shot through me, but it was nothing compared to the feeling of magic swirling around us, binding us together in a way that was deeper than anything I'd ever felt. Lucian's eyes widened as the magic took hold, his body shuddering as the curse began to lift. For a moment, everything was silent. And then, with a roar, the dark magic broke. Lucian collapsed into my arms, the weight of the curse finally gone. But as I held him, I knew something had changed. Something inside me was different now. I wasn't the same Daisy I had been before. Lucian looked up at me, his eyes filled with relief and love. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice trembling. I smiled, even as tears slid down my cheeks. We saved each other. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it together.